Okay, so welcome to part two, the modern landscapes. And the modern landscapes and the sandy soils have very a large connection to the invention of artificial fertilizers. And artificial fertilizers, a plant needs minerals to grow with a little bit of water. And these minerals, they usually come from the soil. But in the sandy soils, the only mineral there is basically SiO2 or quartz or silica. So there's not a lot of minerals in the soil. And so finally, we had a way to introduce these artificially. Now, we used to get these minerals in the soil by letting sheep poop on our acres and then, enkeertgrond, etc. But, the sheep, they became obsolete and, they left the sandy soil areas for large parts. And in competition with other parts of the world, farmers, the farms, they became a lot bigger, and also they consolidated the areas that were already taken into the farm. So, with these artificial fertilizers, a large area on the map that had previously been unused could now be used for agriculture. And so these farms, they became a lot bigger, and this process is called scaling, in Dutch schaalvergroting. Also, what they did was they increased the amount per acre, either animals or crops. So instead of 5 cows per acre, they turned it into 25 or 30 cows per acre. And so, one cow, give it less space and it becomes cheaper, basically. Also, they invested in a lot more machines, and therefore a lot of people, they got fired, and they specialized. So back in the old days, you had a farmer, he grew crops like grain or like vegetables, and he needed the sheep for the poop. So he did both things. He did and cattle and vegetables, basically. And now, cattle went out, and the only thing that farmer did was basically just the grains. And some other farmer, he specialized in cows, and he threw all the other stuff out. He stopped doing the grains, he stopped doing the vegetables, and this is called specialization. So these in the 20th century, farmers specialize. They invest in machines, and it becomes a high-tech business. They intensify, so they try to increase the yield by increasing the amount of animals or the amount of plants or the amount of liters of milk per animal per acre. So, these big farms, huge farms with a lot of animals per square meter or per square kilometer. And it was possible because these areas could grow, on the one hand, because there was a lot of empty space that could now be used thanks to the artificial fertilizer, or in another case, via land consolidation, Dutch word ruilverkaveling. Now, what is that? It's the planned rearrangement and readjustment of land. Here we have, for example, the Malmse S before land consolidation. So you have a farmer, and he's got some land here and here and here, and another farmer, he's got some land over here, and another farmer's got some land over there. And what they do is they just rearrange it. This is now his land, and this is now that land, and this guy's got this land. And so they rearrange it so that it's almost equal, and closer by, a bigger area, unconsolidated, and consolidated, close together. The farm could be here, I don't know. And now the farmer doesn't have to drive all the way here in the afternoon to do this little bit of land. Now, you can imagine that changes a landscape, right? I mean, in 1850, and in 1950 as well, you've got huge areas of land where nothing happens, where it's just basically wild nature. The woeste gronden. This was the literal term for it. It was woest, like wild. And what they did was they reclaimed it. So they basically made it not boost anymore. They made it. They didn't. They made it into land that they could live off. And so the entirety of the Netherlands that was boost for huge areas became very livable and very a cultural landscape in essence. Now, from 1815 to, let's say, 1960, in 100 years, all of the Woestergronden, they were gone. Okay, now the result was that we have a lot of animals and a lot of artificial fertilizers around in these areas. And we basically increased nutrients in that environment, and the result is called eutrophication. What's that, you say? It's a difficult word, eutrophication. Mind the spelling with the EU. Well, eutrophication is this.
Eutrophication is a process that can happen in a water body, like a river or lake, when too many nutrients are added to the system. Eutrophication starts when fertilizers, which are rich in nutrients like nitrate and phosphate, are washed into the river or lake system. This leads to an increase in nutrient concentrations in the water. The nutrients are food for algae, and the algae grow and reproduce quickly, forming a thick green bloom in the water. This algal bloom will absorb sunlight shining on the water, so the sunlight can't reach the bottom. Plants who need this light to photosynthesize will die. The algae will also start to die when they eat up all of the nutrients and run out of food. Next, bacteria start to break down the dead plants and algae, and that releases more nutrients back into the water, continuing the algal bloom cycle. The bacteria, with a continuing supply of food, reproduce into much larger numbers, consuming oxygen as they grow and respire. There's not much oxygen in the water to begin with, so when the bacteria consume it quickly, it might run out completely. Water without oxygen is called anoxic. If the water turns anoxic, all non-bacterial life in the water, including fish and other animals, will die. So, eutrophication happens when nutrients are added to water, which causes an algal bloom, cutting off sunlight and feeding bacteria. The bacteria use up oxygen in the water, which becomes anoxic, causing everything living in the water to die. Eutrophication is one reason why we need to be careful with fertilizers when we're growing crops.
All right. So the idea is that if you put a lot of these artificial fertilizers on the soil, eventually rainwater will come and wash it down into a stream. And once it's into a stream, it's food. So it's food for other plants as well, like algae, and then, everything that you just saw happens. And this is a large problem, especially in the sandy soil areas, because the buffer capacity there is very, very low. So it's really, they are pretty vulnerable systems, and adding too many of these nutrients can give these huge problems. Another problem is called acidification, because when you increase the amount of animals, especially, for example, in North Brabant, where there are innumerably many pigs around, there are more pigs in North Brabant than there are people. So that gives you one idea. The best hams in the world, they come from Brabant. They put the pigs in a truck, and the truck drives to Parma, and then the pig gets butchered there, and then you have Parma ham. Yay! And then we import it back. But the animals there are from North Brabant, so it makes no sense. They just go there to be butchered. Why? Because then we can name it Parma ham. Otherwise, it's just ham. It's the same thing. Anyway, a lot of pig farmers here, And pigs, they shit. They eat everything, which is good, but then they shit a lot as well, and also they produce a lot of urine, which is a problem because the pig shit and the urine, it is very, very acidic stuff. It's got ammonia in it. And here you see a map of the ammonia concentration in the Netherlands. And the areas that are darkest blue are basically, except this part, without exception, this part is the exception, basically all areas where we have sandy soils. And the shit, it needs to be injected into the soil, because if it comes into the atmosphere, then it's very, very bad for our health. Now, you can see that acidification in the Netherlands is a rather big problem. Okay, so two problems with the modern way of living is eutrophication and acidification.